and we're going to go to the Foundry portal. So we're going to follow the link here, which is going to take us to the Azure AI Foundry portal, and we're going to authenticate. Now it's using single sign-on, so it already authenticated me here. So now what I'm going to do, and I'm going to maximize this screen so you can see the whole thing. This is the Foundry portal. Now there's two different portals. You have the OpenAI and the Foundry portal. The portal you're going to want to use going forward is the Foundry portal. This is where all of the real magic happens, if you will. You have a lot more features and tools that you can use. The OpenAI portal, which you see here, gives you a lot, but not there's some other integration that you get when you're using the Foundry portal. So we're going to go in here, and so now I'm in the Azure Foundry portal, and the first thing I need to do in the portal is I need to connect. So notice here, you'll already see the instance that I created. So if I go back to Azure, there it is right there, Bobby AI demo. When I go to my Foundry portal, you'll see that my new instance is there. It's an Azure OpenAI instance. Here's the region, and we just created it a few minutes ago. So now I'm going to go ahead and go into the portal page for that instance. So now I'm in the AI Jamaica demo instance. What you're looking at here is actually here. So we're in this piece right now, making the configurations. So let's go ahead and dive into some of the options. So the first thing you'll need to do is you need to define the models that will be used in this instance. Now, let's talk about what a model is. In Azure, I'm going to bring up our page here. Let's see, I want to find we have some good documentation. Yes, this is what I want. So here are some of the models that we have right here. Now, in your courses, if you're in computer science or software development, you may have seen some of these models, but what these are specific models that are trained to learn a specific thing and to do something specific. GPT, which is, when you hear of Chat GPT and so forth, this is what's called a generative pre-trained transformer. It's a type of model that we have. This is the latest model that we have within Microsoft. More specifically, GPT 4.1 is the model that's generally available. Now we have some other ones. Whenever you see preview, that means it's like in beta. You can use it, you can try to use it, but we may not have SLAs. We're still making changes to it and so forth. Now, what makes each model different is primarily the data sampling that it uses. So let me give you an example. I'm going to click the GP3.5, which is one of the real old models. So let's go ahead and click on it, and it takes me to that part of the page. And what I'm going to do, let me put this link in chat just in case anybody wants it. There's the link to this page here. So let's go ahead and go to GPT-3.5. So the GPT-3.5 comes in a couple different versions. There's a turbo version, here's another one, and then you have an instruct version. Depending on which model you want to use, let's say I want to use this model right here. It gives me JSON, JavaScript capabilities. It gives me parallel function calling. It has a higher accuracy, meaning that when you ask it to do something or ask it a question, the response you're going to get is going to be more fine-tuned. It's going to be more accurate than some of the older models because it's evolved over time. Now, so those are some of the things. The other things that we care about is right here. The maximum request token size. And we're going to dive more into this here in a little bit, so don't worry about this too much. And then here's the other piece. The GPT-3.5 Turbo 0125 model, which you see here, the data it was used to train with was everything up to September of 2021. Here's what that means. If I use the 3.5 model and I ask that model who won the Super Bowl in 2024, the model will come back and tell me, I don't know, I can't predict the future. Because as far as that model is concerned, 2024 is in the future. It knows everything up until 2021. So this is going to be a big difference in your models, along with this piece here, which we'll get into here very shortly. So let's go back to the top here, and let's look at another model. So let's look at the GPT-4.1. Now, GPT-4.1 comes in, again, different versions here. And by the way, for these versions, the timestamp in some cases does matter. So let's take a look at this one here, the GPT-4.1. First of all, notice here, the training data sample. So it was trained up until May of last year. So if I ask it anything up until May of last year, it'll give me the answer. The other things, again, the token size, which we'll get into, our context window, which we'll get into, and then the newer models, like GPT-3.5, can only do text, meaning I can ask it a question or have it write me a book, and it'll write it for me. It'll provide a text response. With the newer models, it now provides image generation technologies. Also, it can do audio, video to text translation and text to video translation. It can analyze images and provide information about images if you want. With the newer models, you can literally take a picture, paste it into your OpenAI prompt, and say, hey, describe this picture for me. And AI will look at the picture, analyze it, and describe it for you. So the newer models give you a lot more capabilities along with more recent information than the older models. And then you can go with, let's say, the GPT-4. The GPT-4 models, again, it goes up to October of 2023. The token size varies a little bit. There's multiple versions of GPT-4, and for each one, it tells you exactly what you get with it. So the models you select are important. So let's go back into our, by the way, any questions on that piece for now? So now let's go back into our Foundry portal. So within our Foundry portal, which I'm at now, the first thing I need to do is specify a model. Now to do that, I'm going to go down here in my deployment section. We're going to go to deployments. And notice here, deployment model, I'm going to create a new model. So I'm going to select a base model. By the way, the finely tuned models are custom models, which we won't cover in this course. So we're going to go and we're going to pick a model. So now you can start seeing, there's my GPT-4.1, there's 4.5, there's my Omni, I've got computer per use preview. For this one, I've got DALL-E. DALL-E's for image generation. DaVinci's for completions. Like I can start a thought and it'll complete the thought for me. There's my GPT-3.5 models. So these models that you're seeing here are essentially the ones that you see listed in this page. So those are all the models that are available. And again, different models will do different things. So we're going to pick one. So we're going to go with GPT 4.1. And in here it gives me a description of what that model does. So I'm going to accept this model. I'm going to click OK. Let's go ahead and confirm it. So now Azure wants me to do something. So what I've done now is in my Frontier portal, I've got my instance setting. We'll call it instance settings. And in the instance settings, I said, we're going to use the GPT 4.1 model. Not God, that's Game of Thrones. So we can use the GPT 4.1 model. So that's what we're doing right now. By the way, some of the other models that you'll see in here, there are some that deal with embeddings. Embeddings is more of looking for similarities and differences in your data. Like I want to know all the positive or negative comments. I want to know things like, are there similarities or differences? So it looks at it from I just had a brain fart. What do you call it? I can't. The word will come to me. Not logarithmic table. I can't remember the word now. I just had a brain fart. But that's all right. It'll pop into my head in a little bit. So you can do look at a model that compares and contrasts things is what I'm looking for here. So for the one we're going to pick is GPT-4.1. I'm going to give it a unique name. So I'm going to call it Jamaica GPT. Let's put the model number 4.1 in there just so we have it. Now, when this model is deployed, where do you want the request to be sent? Remember, Microsoft has 60, 70 different regions. And if you were, I would say over 100 data, 121 data centers spread across the world. So when my application submits a request to this instance, Where do I want the request to be processed? Can anything process it, which is global standard? Or do I want it to be processed in a specific location, which is zone standard? Here's the difference. When you guys start working for a company, if you work for, let's say, an international company, one of the biggest concerns are compliance standards. Like if you have a footprint in Europe, you've got to follow things like GDPR, which is a framework, a standard. If you're in the United States and it deals with healthcare, you have to look at things like HIPAA, Sarbanes-Oxley, and all of these different regulations. So there may be an instance where the data must reside in a certain boundary and it can't leave out. So that's where you can go with a zone type deployment. Another option that we have here is batch, which is we can do bulk configurations here and so forth. So we can pick the geographical location for where we want it to be processed. I'm going to use the default now. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to customize some of the settings. So I'm using the GPT 4.1 model. Now, if you go into our cheat sheet here are the GPT 4.1 models that I can use. Each model will have some type of name or unique identifier as part of it. So in here, I can specify. So right here, notice the version. I'm using the, what was that, April 14th, 2025. That ties back to this right here. This one right here, April 14th, 2025, because it's the standard, not the fast model. Now, over time, Microsoft will make upgrades. So it'll go from, I'll say, April 14th, 2025 to maybe June 14th, 2025. There's a new version. I can tell my system whenever a new upgrade comes in, automatically upgrade it, or I can say, nope, I don't want it to automatically upgrade. I'll manually upgrade it. So I can go in there and I can specify that. So for now, we'll let it automatically upgrade. And then we're going to deploy it. So now I've got an instance of my model. Now that instance technically is being configured in here, but you don't see it. You're actually setting it up here, but it's sending the settings over here. Any questions, anyone at this point? Any questions? So now I've got my model created. So now I need to test it and I need to do customization. So I'm going to go to my playground. So into my playground section, because this model, I'm focused on chatting, like text-based stuff for right now, I'm going to go to the chat playground. So I'm in the chat playground and I'm going to look at my model. So here are the models. There's my Jamaica one that I just created. So now I'm actually using that model for my testing. Now, most of you guys have probably used ChatGPT before. So most of you have gone in here and used ChatGPT or Copilot. What I'm demonstrating to you right now is building your own version of ChatGPT or Copilot. That's what we're doing here. But you've been to these before, where you've gone in and you ask it a question or do research and it gives you a response. What you don't see when you're using ChatGPT or Copilot or any of these is behind the scenes, there are a lot of configuration settings that determine what the response, when you type something in here, how will AI respond? So in your playground, you can customize how your AI model respond to a request from an application. And that's in your playground. So now I've got my model built, which is right here. The next thing I want to do is I want to give my model some instructions, some guidelines. To give you an example, whenever someone asks a question to my model, I want my model to respond in a very happy tone or very professional tone. Or, watch this. I can't type, by the way. I want it to respond as if it was during the Shakespeare time. So if you're familiar with Shakespeare, I want it to respond in the tone and in the wording that they did, thou thus justest, all that stuff from Shakespeare. So what I'm doing is I'm telling my model, whenever somebody asks you a question or requests something, respond as if you're Shakespeare. And then I'm going to go in here and give it some additional things. Do not respond to any question, any information or request related to, let's say, religion or a higher being. So I can go in there and I can specify rules of engagement. If I were building this for an HR application, I may say, hey, if somebody has a question about, time off forms or the vacation policy, respond. But if they ask about how much another employee makes, don't respond. So you can define the rules that you want. I'm going to save this. So now I've saved that. So that's the most basic thing. I've set some ground rules here. There we go. So I've set some ground rules. Over here on the right is where you can test. This is like your Copilot or ChatGPT prompt. So I'm going to type in some stuff in here, and it's going to show me the results here. And the results are going to be based off of my instructions. So I'm going to go in here and say, tell me about the country of Jamaica. So notice here, notice how it responded. Mary, thou seeketh knowledge of Jamaica, a land most fair and wondrous. Why did it respond like that? Because I told it whenever it responds to talk like you're from the Shakespearean times, like you're from Shakespeare. Another thing, so let's do another thing. Tell me about the Catholic religion. I can spell religion today. I can't spell religion today. So tell me about religion. So notice here, it's still going to respond in Shakespeare, but I said, don't respond to anything related to that. So what it did is say, good fellow, thou hast asked me a matter upon which I beg thy forbearance. Basically, it says, this is translated to say, I'm sorry, but I can't give you an answer. Why? Because in the instructions, I said, don't give that. But if I ask it anything else, tell me about I can't spell today. Universities. Tell me about Jamaican University. Luckily, AI can spell better than I can. So there it is. So now there's our UTech. There's another one and so forth. So let's get rid of the Shakespeare piece so it doesn't keep talking like Shakespeare. I'm going to save that. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to clear this and just start over again. So tell me about, or give me a list. Let's do that. So give me a listing of the universities in Jamaica along with their location. So there it is. It listed it and so forth. Notice here in the response, certainly, here's a list of universities. It's not talking like Shakespeare anymore. So let's talk about why this is important. If you're developing an application, let's say you work for a travel agency, okay? And you're developing an AI app where customers can go to your website and ask questions about travel packages and this and that. Typically, when somebody books a vacation, they're happy, they're excited. So if I'm a travel agency, when somebody asks my AI questions, I want it to respond in a very happy and exciting tone. Congratulations on your trip. I'm going to use the words that sound very exciting. So that's where this comes into play, along with other things like don't respond to, you can set ground rules for how to respond or how not to respond and so forth. Any questions on this? So this is called your system message, your guidelines. Now, the next thing we have, there's some additional settings that we can configure here. So let's go ahead and clear our stuff here. And let's look at some additional settings. And by the way, all of these settings as developers, you're going to configure. The first one is past messages included. Let me give you an example of what this means. So let's say I say, who won the FIFA World Cup in 2018? So it came back and said France beat Croatia. And then I said, who was the player of the match? So who was the MVP of the match? So in this case here, Antoine Griezmann was the player of the match. And then I'm going to ask it, how old is he and does he have a family? Let's ask it a question. So there you go. So it says, yes, he's married to this person here, and he's got some kids. Here's what happens. The message history included, basically, when I asked the first question, it went to the AI model. AI came back and provided my response, which is right here. When I asked the second question, here's what happened. The model, the system, sent this to AI, as well as my follow-up question. The reason for that is because AI can't remember what you're talking about. There is no consistent session history. Let's put it that way. So the way AI keeps track of what we're talking about is it always sends what we were talking about along with the follow-up question. So now it has context on what we're discussing. And then it came back with this response. And then when I said, hey, is he married? Or does he have a family and how old he is? What happened is it sent all of this back up to AI along with my follow-up question. And then that came back and gave me my response. What this past message included number means is how many of the previous parts of the conversation are we going to send to AI as part of the conversation. Now, let me give you an example. If the question is something simple, like, what form do I need to fill out for something? And there's never going to be a follow-up question. Then you can set your message history to 1. But if somebody's going to ask a question and AI is going to respond, and you think that the user is going to ask maybe a follow-up question to that, and then maybe there's a conversation going on back and forth. Like, I'll give you an example. The travel agency. A customer may go to your website and ask AI, hey, are there any travel sales, any packages for the month of August? The AI will come back and say, yes, here are our packages that we have available for August. Now, normally, a user will then say, okay, tell me more about package A. So now what happens is AI is going to get the first part of the conversation plus the package A question. And then AI responds. And then the user may say, well, how much is that package? And then AI responds. And then the user may say, are there limitations on how many children I can bring? Or are there any other discounts related to that package? So you see there's back and forth going on. So in that scenario, you've got to kind of guesstimate how much of the conversation you want to include as part of the next question. Now, you may be wondering, well, why don't I just set this to the max? Because the way you're billed for using AI is based on something called a token. A token. Now, that's where this comes back into play. Let's go back to our 3.5 example here for a second. Where's my 3.5? Right here. That's where this column comes into play. A token is a representation of the data you're submitting. For simplicity's sake, now this is not exact, but for simplicity's sake, imagine it this way. One token is equivalent to about 5 letters. 5 letters. So if I go back into here, when I asked this, and by the way, I can tell you exactly how many tokens it is, but when I asked this question, the word who may be one question. The word who with maybe the W from 1 is 1 token. The ON and the is another token. FIFA could be another token. The word world is a token. Cup and end is a token, and then 2018. So this may cost me roughly 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tokens to submit that request. So that is called an input token. When AI responds to the request, this is an output token. And again, it's the same way. the output in this case is going to cost me more in tokens. So going back to our tables here, the older models limit how many words you can use in your request. And then notice the output is going to be smaller. By the way, 4,000 tokens is still a lot. It's a lot of words, but it's still, it's a quarter of the words that you can put in. With the newer models, as we go up this list, you'll notice, like the O series, you can have up to 200,000 tokens. So let's say hypothetically that's about, let's say that's 50,000 words. And then the output could be 100,000. Androwski, yes, go ahead.
This is amazing content, Bobby. I just wanted to pause here just to check with everyone. Is everyone following? What is not clear? We would love to hear your feedback so Bobby can provide the clarity, because this is fundamentally important for all the workshops we're gonna execute in person in Jamaica on the 23rd and 24th of October. So it's really important that you understand these concepts, because these are higher level order concepts. So any questions, Dennis, Ashley?
Dennis, you say cloud referencing. When you say cloud referencing, Dennis, what did you mean? And if you have a mic, you can unmute your mic. You don't have to type it. What do you mean by cloud referencing? If you're talking, Dennis, I can't hear you, just so you know.
Are you hearing me now? Good afternoon.
Yeah. Yes, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Previously you were trying to remember a word. So that is when I referenced the word cross-referencing. I was wondering if that was the word you were looking for.
No, it's God, let me draw it, and you guys are mathematicians. You have this, and then you have something that goes like that. What do you call that? What do you call that? I can't. What am I talking about here, guys?
That is looking like a sine wave to me.
It's a sine wave, but it's so basically with embeddings, it's a logarithmic table where you can plot things to determine, anything over here is going to be similar. Everything over here is going to be within the same category. That's what embedding does. But I cannot think of the word to save my life right now. But but cool.
Okay, understood. So far it is going great. I am actually anticipating the moment you actually show us how to connect the endpoints to the applications.
Absolutely. All right, so again, the difference between your models has an impact on how many words you can have in the request and how many words can come out as your response. That's what the token size, that's what this max request token column is. So again, let's say we do 5-to-1, so that's roughly what, 40,000 words in your request and 20,000 words in the response. Once it hits the max for that response, it'll basically stop wherever it's left off at. But why is that important? Remember, if you include the maximum, so if I slide this all the way across the maximum, that means I'm going to use a lot more tokens in my response as well as in my request. That costs more money. So as an organization, as a developer, you may say, you know what? I want to kind of control some of the costs. So I'm only going to include, the last 3 parts of the conversation or so forth. So you can slide this, all the way over here to up to 20. So maximum is 20 here. So if you have a very back and forth conversation, you can do that. So now that basically defines how much of the previous conversation you're going to include when you ask another question. The second thing that you have here is your max completion tokens. The word completion means the output. When I submit this request, this is the completion. How big of a response do you want AI to generate for you? This goes, again, back to controlling cost. If you want your responses to be very concise, make the max completion tokens smaller. Notice here, I'm going to make this, so for the GPT-4.1, the maximum completion token is 32,000 tokens. If I go back to my table here for GPT-4.1, which is down here somewhere, 4.1. Where's my 4.1? It's in here somewhere. That's where that third. Let me go back to our chart here. Right here. That's where that 32,768 number comes from. The maximum size of the response. And this is off by a couple, but that's what it's for. There it is right there. Now, let me give you an example. You got to be careful though. Let's make our maximum completion token something small. So let's make it 30. And then in here, I'm going to say, oops, it's got to be 100. Okay. I'm going to say, tell me about the Harry Potter series. And my typing is atrocious. But notice here, I said, tell me about the Harry Potter series. It started talking to me, gave me a response. And notice right here, it cut off because it hit the maximum token count. It can't respond anymore. So what I could do is I could say, okay, let's change this a little bit. Let's make it 500. I'm going to clear this. So now, tell me about the Harry Potter series. Notice my response is a lot larger now. It still cut me off because it wanted to give me more data because I hit my 500 token count. So this is great as developers if you want to reduce, again, cost. This is purely for cost. But you got to be careful because if your application requires a longer response than you set up, it's always going to cut, it could cut it off in mid-sentence. So you're going to have to play around with this. And by the way, all of these settings that I'm going through here, which we're going to finish this up, our demos next week and dive more into it. But all of these settings you'll put into your application code. I'm going to show you probably our last week of the session. I'm going to show you an app where we configure all this. So you'll see it in Python and see how you actually do it in your code to make that API call. All right, so those are your tokens. Any questions on tokens? This is just your playground. You're playing around with the settings, and then you're going to put them in your code after you get all the settings tweaked, just the way you want them. So this is just for getting everything, finding the right mix of settings to put into your code. Now, the next option we have here is temperature. Now, the temperature and the top P, you never use them both at the same time. You use one or the other. AI, or in this case, generative AI, is a predictive technology, meaning that when I ask AI a question or I tell it to do something, it comes up with, let's say it wants to respond with a sentence. So let me give you an example. Tell me about Jamaica. So it's a predictive technology, meaning when it responds, it's going to look at what is the most likely response. Based on all the letters, all the wording, what is the most likely response that we'll need? So what it does is it starts with one word, and then it says, okay, after the word absolutely, what will be the next logical word to use? Okay, in this case, here's. Okay, what's the next logical word to use? And it keeps going through this. This is called probability, okay, or predictability. So it's using probability to determine what's the next probable outcome. And it does that for every word within here, along with the overall response. Now, with probability, what it's looking at is, what's the best way to do it? So let me give you an example here. For temperature, if you hover over it, controls the randomness of the response. Use lower to be more deterministic. So if I make my temperature a 1, or in this case a 0, what this means is it's always going to use the most probable word after the current word. To make this easier, it's going to be less creative in its response. I would have a temperature of 0 if I wanted my model to generate code, because I want the code to be as efficient as possible. I would make my temperature higher if I wanted the model to write a review for me about a restaurant. Hey, I just went to this restaurant. Can you write a 3-paragraph review on how much I love the restaurant? In that scenario, I want the model to be more creative in its response. So let me give you an example of that. So let's make the temperature very low. And I'm going to say write a review of McDonald's. In no more, and I'm going to put some parameters here. No more than 200 words. So notice the response. Very boring. McDonald's is a global fast food giant known for its consistency and convenience. The menu features classics like Big Mac. So it's very boring in its response. There's nothing nice or nothing creative about it. So now let's increase the temperature. I'm going to go to the opposite, which is 1, and let's do the same thing and watch what happens here. So notice the word use. McDonald's is widely recognized for its consistency and speedy service. The menu offers a classic favors. So you notice it's using more colorful language in the response. So your temperature controls how you want, how you want that response to be. Now, I mentioned that you never use temperature and top P. You always use one or the other. Temperature is top probability, okay? So let me give you an example of how this works. When I asked the model to tell me about McDonald's, it said, okay, the first word that I'm going to use is going to be McDonald's. So what it did is behind the scenes, it's got a probability matrix, and it says, okay, the words I can use are McDonald's. I can start with the word restaurant. I can start with the word fast food. I'm just making things up here. So these are the options that I can start with. With top P, if I go in here and set this, if I set it to a 1, it's going to use, it could use any of these 3 words to start the conversation. If I set it to 0, it's going to use the most probable word in the scenario, which in this list, let's say McDonald's is the most probable word. So it starts the conversation with the word McDonald's. And then again, what's the next word? Is it going to be is? Is it going to be was? Is it going to be word number 3, word number 4, whatever? And because our probability is set to low, it's going to use the most probable next word, which is the word is. And then it keeps doing that. If you set your top P to a high number, then what it does is it says, okay, the first word could be McDonald's, it could be restaurant, it could be fast food, it could be some other things. So in here, it's going to say, okay, from a probability standpoint, there's a 90% chance that we should use the word McDonald's. There's a, let's say, 5% chance of restaurant and a 5% chance of using fast food. Because our top P is high, the system can pick from any of these 3 words. So it may actually use this word as to start the sentence off. Both of those, top P and temperature, deal with creativeness of the response in your model. Any questions on that? Any questions? By the way, just to give you a little sneak peek of what you would do. So once you've got this configured, the way, Dennis, yes, go ahead.
Yes, you said that with the top P and the temperature, you either choose one or the other. Could you elaborate on that a bit?
So do you want it to be more creative? Creative means more colorful in language. So temperature, top P, they do very similar things, but how they do it is a little bit different. Top P uses something called nucleus sampling. So let me show you here. So the underlying technology for top P is something called nucleus sampling, also known as top P sampling, is a technique for autoaggressive language model decoding. It selects a subset of the vocabulary words based on the probable token. So basically, what is the percentage of probability that this word is going to be used or that word? Until the sum of the probabilities is less than the threshold. So the threshold is that number 1. That number 1 is actually a percentage. It's 100%. If I set it to, if I move this over, watch what happens to my number here. These are all percentages. So 15 is actually 15%. So what this means, if I have 15 words that I can use in my first word. With top P, it's going to use the top 15% of those words, which may be 3 words. And then from those 3 words, it'll determine which word to use. If I make my top P 100%, and I've got 15 words I can use, then the model can say, okay, I can use any one of these 15 words, and then it just picks one. They both help you in refining how you respond. But temperature is more about colorful language. Do you want it to be more descriptive? That's the big difference between them.
Okay, understood. Thank you very much.
They both do very similar things, but the underlying technology to determine how to do it is different. That's why you don't want to use, you want to use one versus the other. And by the way, we're going to go through the rest of these settings because we're hitting on our time here. We're going to go through the rest of these settings next week. But here's the thing. So once you've got all of this set up, you got all of this in here, you got all your parameters set up, then here is your actual code. And in your code, you'll see in here, let me see. Here's where you put your endpoint. You scroll down a little bit. There's the max token use, our temperature, our top P, frequency, and we'll get into the other ones here later on. But this is where you go in your code, in your SDK, and you define the settings that you're configuring here. So these settings that you're configuring here, you're just doing this to test it, to make sure it's giving you the response you want. Once you got it done, then you go and you can take this code and put into your application, which I'll show you how to do, not next week, probably the week after. That'll be our last piece, tying it into an actual web application. Any questions? And like Adrowski said, one of the things that you want to keep in mind, little hint for you, if you're going to be in one of our challenges where you're writing, creating applications for some of the Microsoft challenges, you want to integrate AI in it. AI is huge at Microsoft, so we're going to want to see that technology, whether it be generative AI or language or vision or some AI technology you want to incorporate in your projects. All right, guys, any other questions before we wrap up for today? All right. Thank you guys for attending.
All right,
and Ashley, yes. Did you have a question? Yes.
Yeah, is this recorded? Because I would really and truly love to watch this over.
We are transcribing it, but I don't think we're actually recording it. Androwski, if you know better, please let me know. But I know that actually we are recording it. I take it back. Yes, we are. Androwski, are you going to be able to give them the recordings once we're done, once it does its thing, Teams does its thing?
So by the end of tomorrow, all the sessions so far will be on the Project Blue Mountains YouTube channel. So please check there tomorrow for all the lecturers. It's going to be under the playlist of PBM Summer 2025 workshops.
Excellent, excellent. There you go.
You see this video there as well, and the one that you did this morning as well, Ashley, will be there as well.
Excellent. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
You can create your own free Azure account. So if you go to if you just do a quick search for free Azure account as a student, because you guys have student email addresses, if you go in here and click, usually it's the first link right here. Here you can try Azure for free. And then once you register and create it, then you can use your student account to get monthly credits toward so you can play around with Azure. It's usually $100 in credits a month that you can use to build things, including the AI stuff that we're showing you here. So yes.